Hello everyone, dear teachers from around the globe, and welcome to another session with the talented teachers from everywhere. And today my guest, as you can see, wonderful Christopher Walker, and I'm so glad that we're gonna have this session. Chris, hello, how are
Hello.
you?
Hello, Olga. Very nice to meet you finally. I've been following you for a while on Instagram and on Facebook, and a lot of my friends have had the opportunity to speak with you. I think you had a session or two with Antoine Marks not too long ago.
Exactly, we had.
Brilliant guy, wonderful guy. I don't think I've met him in real life, actually. I think he's
No.
a pandemic pal, we could call him.
Mhm.
Yeah, 'cause there's been a lot of networking. I think that's one of the great things of the last year and a half. Is just my online social circle is booming. It's enormous compared to what it was 2 years ago.
Exactly. So advantages and disadvantages. At least we
Indeed.
have the opportunity to meet and to talk and exchange our experience and our knowledge. And I think at least from this perspective, from this side, we really benefit a lot talking to each other, following each other on social media and networks, and having such conversations and interviews and sessions. You mentioned Antoine. That's true. We had interview with him, and we're gonna have another one actually next week after you. And I watched your session with him, and I enjoyed it tremendously. I cannot tell you enough how much fun I had, and the time just flew. I enjoyed the activity so much, and it was just so interesting to watch. And I've never practiced those before, and they're already on my list, so these I'm gonna implement with my students. So thank you so much for teaching this lesson and experiencing this opportunity as well. So just let me please introduce you, Christopher. Guys, if you don't know, just, you know what, go to Google and put Christopher Walker in the Google search, and you will have all the information about him. Christopher is an EFL teacher for many years. He is an honorable presenter at such conferences as ITEFL Poland and Hungary. I actually saw your session on ITEFL Poland, I think. Was it in September last year?
The online one, yes, that was my second IATEFL Poland. I've done one face-to-face, which I think had 6 people present, and then I did another one online that I think had more than 6.
Brilliant.
Although how many of those people were actually present is always difficult to say with online sessions. You start to wonder how many people are actually just marking their homework and they've turned their camera off. You never know, do you?
Yeah. Well, you know, we all do our best with this online situation, just that we learn the best we can. And just to mention that Christopher is from the UK, but currently based in Poland, exactly Bielsko-Biała.
That's correct,
Difficult
yes.
to pronounce even for me, working for International House, teaching many different age groups.
Yeah, pretty much everyone. Yeah. If you can think of an age group or a level, I've either taught them this year or I've taught them sometime in the last 10 or 12 years, the time that I've spent at the school. Yeah.
Right. All right. And also Christopher is a writer, so I really encourage you to check out his website and see the number of publications. You will be just amazed, and it's just bravo to you, Christopher.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Such an honor. And as the title suggests, today we will be talking about grammar, but not only, because this is one of the most vital topics, and Christopher suggested this one, and I said, yes, we definitely should cover this, because this is really interesting one, and the one which should be discussed. Because actually, what is the problem with grammar? What is the issue here, Christopher?
Well, there are many issues around grammar and the way that it's presented in course books. And first of all, in case there are any course book writers watching this or who want to take issue with the things that I say, I don't blame course book writers for the situation we're in. I don't blame the people who write grammar books either. It's a kind of difficult situation that we find ourselves in as teachers, because on the one hand, to really explain what's going on with grammar, it requires quite a high level of knowledge on the part of our students. So what happens, quite rationally, I suppose, is that coursebook writers try to smooth the way, and they suggest certain rules for pieces of grammar that are not necessarily true. They are at least quite useful in the short term, but they can lead to real problems further down the road. I'll give you one example straight off the bat, and that is will, and the idea that will embodies this so-called future simple. And I don't think it does. A lot of writers don't think so either. I think you'll find books out there that suggest that there is no future simple. And a lot of teachers disagree with the idea of future simple as well. I was really taken with the way that Alex Tilbury put all of these sort of things together in International House's language awareness course. So he had a big effect on me, as did Michael Lewis, the writer of The English Verb. So the idea is that will gives you future simple meaning. So, for example, tomorrow I will go to the shops. You say, okay, well, that's fair enough. But then as soon as you start to really examine it, it all starts to break down. Present simple has a different third person singular. This so-called future simple doesn't. I will, you will, he, she, it will, not wills. So already it's a little bit different. But then you start to meet will in different situations as well. You also start to find different ways of talking about the future. And from there, confusion very quickly sets in. And I'll never forget the day that I turned up for work at one of the other employers that I've had in the past, which was a small university in Oświęcim. I came to school. I was teaching them speaking, these university students in years 2 and 3. And they all had this kind of look of distress on their face. And I said, what's going on? And they said, well, Chris, we've just been doing grammar in our lessons. And well, look at this. And they handed me a sheet of A4, and it showed all the different meanings of will. So will for politeness, for example. If you will just take a seat, the manager will see you soon. You had will for complaints. Well, if you will keep eating chocolate, what do you expect to happen? You had will for present moment predictions. For example, there's a knock at the door. That will be the manager coming to see us. They couldn't get their heads around it. And the problem was that they'd swallowed this idea at an early age of will being the future simple, instead of will just being another modal verb that works on the main or lexical verb in whatever sentence you're trying to put together. So I sat down with them and we looked at will, we looked at its essence, its essential meaning, and we tried to unpack what they'd learned and what they are expecting to learn. And once we'd done that, we started to see that it's not so complicated after all. And you can actually start to really figure out when you would use will and when you would use one of the other forms. It's just a shame that these students had already reached their second or even third year of university by the time they wanted to do this. But the same thing held true for pretty much every grammar concept you could think of. For example, present perfect. If you ever ask a student what present perfect is for, they might have learned the kind of dictionary definition, which is a past action that has a present consequence.
One of the favorite ones.
But why do we call it present perfect in that case? What's the past got to do with that? I mean, it's present perfect.
Yeah.
And actually, if you start with that, if you start with putting yourself in the present, everything falls into place very quickly. So when we use present perfect, for example, I have had 3 cups of tea today, to take one random example.
Yes.
I'm in the present moment, and for whatever reason that I've chosen, I'm looking back at the past. I'm considering the tea that connects the present moment with those past moments. And pretty quickly, when you get into that kind of essential viewpoint of what present perfect really is, you don't really need to learn too many extra rules. In fact, you don't need to learn any. A lot of grammar books or course books will say it would be a recent past event that has a present consequence. But what does recent mean? For example, humans have been interested in where they come from since the very first member of Homo sapiens.
Correct.
Is that recent?
No.
Not particularly, no. So once you start thinking of it as a relationship between times, present perfect is your relationship with the present looking at the past, everything else falls into place. If we start moving to a different time, we still have that relationship. If you go to a future time, there are different constructions you can use to look back from that perspective. If you go to the past, you're looking back from that perspective. You're just shifting where you are. And once you get that idea, that essential idea of it being a relationship between times, and quite a subjective one, I have to add, you don't really need to worry too much about all the different grammar contexts and things like that. It just all falls into place.
I so can relate everything what you just said in terms of, first of all, learning the English language and grammar myself being a student, and then as a teacher, going through all the methodology and the way how we were taught how we are supposed to teach grammar, and it was so confusing. And the thing is that because we are not native speakers, it comes with the time, with the experience. We do not live in the country, so we truly believe in everything what is written in the book. Actually, we were taught that present perfect is the one of the action which is result visible in right now. So we're teaching our students like that, but then you kind of get exposed to the language, you listen to different podcasts, you talk to native speakers, and you're like, okay. And then questions come from students as well.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that will never be easy is the fact that a lot of grammar, and I think this is true pretty much of all languages, but a lot of English grammar certainly, is dependent on what the speaker chooses to say. Now, it might be a completely subconscious choice. They might not know that they're choosing this particular formulation, but it is still a subjective choice. So the choice between past simple and present perfect in a lot of contexts is really down to the speaker. And that means that the audience, the person listening to that sentence or the person reading the example in the book, might not be able to see the difference because the difference is now opaque. They don't see where it's come from. So, for example, if my wife says when I get home, have you had a good day? Instead of did you have a good day? Maybe there's a difference in the reason why she chose it. Maybe she thought from have you had a good day? She's asking that because in that present moment, when she sees me at 9 o'clock at night, she's now thinking about the day leading up to that time. She's showing that relationship.
Absolutely.
Or maybe she's choosing past simple because now that I'm home and it's 9 o'clock, the day is basically at an end. There is no more day to come. So she now considers or conceptualizes the day as being in the past. And if you think of it as being in the past, you choose past simple. But if all you have are those two sentences and the speaker has now disappeared, there's no way you'll ever get to the heart of the meaning. And you'll never know why the two sentences are roughly equivalent.
So true. We have a comment here. So, hello, Victoria. Happy to see you here. Thank you for coming. So, Victoria says the problem is that even though course books don't call it future simple, it is always taught first in any A1, A2 course book.
That's very true. Yes, it is an unavoidable fact. We need to have these kind of shortcuts, these rough and ready models, and from those models then build more sophisticated models and then tell our students what you learned before isn't necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a use for that, because some students will only reach a certain level and never go beyond it. And for those students, that's fine. If they want to think of the future simple as being will plus the verb, that's fine. I'm not going to interfere with that. If they want to go beyond A2, B1 level, then you need to break it down a little bit and start talking about will showing certainty in some respect. And then you can start bringing in other modals. For example, might. What's the difference between I will go shopping tomorrow and I might go shopping tomorrow? We're still looking at the future.
Mm-hmm.
We're just showing our different relationship with that action, our mood, if you wish. Mood leading to modal. I mean, that's where it comes from. The mood of the speaker leads to the modal verb. I like the comment, though, and I think it's particularly germane. I always think about my chemistry lessons back at school. Now, this is a long time ago, but I studied chemistry to A level. At GCSE, which was the exam that we take at around the age of 15, 16, which I guess is like the year 8 exams in Poland, we learned the shell model, which was where you had these lovely, neat little circular drawings of atoms. And you'd have the little circle in the middle showing the nucleus with however many protons and neutrons went in there. And then you would draw concentric circles around that nucleus, showing the position of the electrons. It was a lovely model. The only problem with the model was that it wasn't true. But that aside, it helped us all pass our exams. Just as at A1, A2 level, thinking of will for future simple will help you pass the tests at that level. And 90% of the time, it will help you communicate. When I went on to the A-level course that I did in chemistry, pretty much on day one, the teacher said, "Hey, do you remember that beloved shell model? I'm afraid it's not true at all. We don't know really how to think of electrons. They're like a probability cloud." I'd never put those two words together before. Probability cloud? What does that even mean? I still really don't know what it means. But we had to relearn everything so that we could then go on to, if we wished, study university level chemistry and everything that came beyond it. There comes a point when those crutches of the lower levels have to be discarded and you have to walk on your own 2 feet. But I think that there are two central problems with grammar presentations, and they are problems that we as teachers can help our students with. They're related. The first one is to make sure that students understand the importance of context. Context is king. And the second thing is to make sure that the students are looking in the right place in the sentence. Yeah. So if I can, I'd like to give a couple of examples to illustrate these points. And we'll start with the second one, which is this idea of looking at the right information in the sentence. Okay, so I could make a present continuous statement. I'm going to do that now. I'm eating pancakes. Okay. Do you know what time I'm referring to when I say I'm eating pancakes?
Yeah, at least this very moment or this particular period of time in your life.
Okay. Good guess. Now I'm going to change the sentence slightly, and I want you to tell me what time I'm talking about. I'm eating pancakes tonight. So what time does it talk about?
Tonight, this evening.
So the future.
Future, right.
Yeah. Let's say that 8 o'clock is still late afternoon then. Okay. But do you notice what's going on here? There's a very strange thing happening. The first sentence I gave you included the verb and its operator. So I'm eating pancakes. And you said that it's the present moment. But then I gave you another sentence, I'm eating pancakes tonight, and you changed your answer for the time in which the action would happen. But I didn't change the verb. I didn't change the form of the verb, and I didn't change the operator. So how is it possible that the time of the action changed if none of the other information changed?
One word.
one word, which then leads me to this idea that we're looking in the wrong place for our information. And when we dig deeper, we actually discover that present continuous is itself not really very well named, because it doesn't mean that an action occurs at the present moment. The continuous forms, when we really get into it, and I am skipping a number of stages in the logic here, when we really get into it, we're talking about a limited form, something that exists in time, that has a start and a finish. Now, where in time it exists requires us to know more. So when I say I'm eating pancakes, you don't know when that happens, but usually, and this links to the idea of context, usually you can guess. So for example, imagine that I keep kind of going off screen a little bit, and you say, sorry, Chris, what are you doing? And I say, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm eating pancakes. Okay. Now, because of the context, you seeing with your eyes, or at least hearing chewing sounds, you start to think, oh, okay, it must be the present moment. But then you could also say, what are you having for dinner later? What are you eating for supper? Oh, I'm eating pancakes tonight. Yeah. And that places that limited duration action now in the future. But we have to look at the right part of the sentence. It's not the verb. That doesn't tell us. No, it's the extra information, the time reference itself. And in most cases, we find that it's either the context or another part of the sentence that really tells us when the action happens. And if we don't have our eyes on the ball, or at least if we don't know which ball to be looking at in a particular game, then we're really going to deceive ourselves. Now, I'd like to give you another example, and this one will be, again, quite interactive. So this is a classic. You find it in so many course books, and it's something that teachers will quite often use when they want to teach the difference between will and going to.
Okay.
Person A says, it's hot in here. I'm going to give you three.
Open the window.
Yeah, I'll give you three possible responses, and I want you to tell me which one's right. A, I'm going to open the window. B, I'll open the window. And C, I'm opening the window. Which of the three would you say is correct?
All three.
Well done. Very good. But can you tell me why?
Because it depends on what I want to say. So you say, I'm hot. And if you're my guest, I'm like, don't worry, I'm already opening the window, right? So I can stand up and do it immediately. Then, don't worry, let me just have a sip of water, and I'm going to open the window, or give me just a minute. Or, all right. So I make ongoing decision, just a very fast decision. I will open the window.
Okay, so you made this fast decision. So you might start thinking, so will must mean a decision at the moment of speaking. Maybe not. First of all, context is very important. And I really like the way that you clarified your answers by giving me the context. We never get the context when we look in the grammar book. If it says check the grammar reference on page 194, it's not going to give you a whole load of contexts. It's not going to say, A says, it's hot in here. B says, yes, I know you've said it 3 times. I am going to open the window, but please will you let me finish this page?
Right.
We don't hear the tone of voice of the speaker. If they were a little bit angry about it because they'd already made the decision, they'd planned an action, hence going to, and then they want to do it, yeah, we don't get that tone of voice. Maybe the person speaking in A is actually blind. Oh, it's hot in here. And you say, don't worry, sir, I am opening the window now. Oh, very good, very good. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Yes, I can feel the draft now. We don't know. Now, what about will? And again, I want to come back to this idea of looking in the right place. I will open the window. In that sentence, what would you say is the most important word?
I will.
Will, maybe.
Open.
Well, open, yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going to be smash, I suppose, but it could be.
Yeah.
I will smash the window. Happy. Well, I think that the most important word here is I.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what we said earlier. Will is an example of a modal verb. Modal
Yes.
verbs are used to express your mood.
Yes.
Now, whose mood do you think you can really describe?
Mine.
Your own. Yes. So notice there has never been a grammar guide in a course book or a grammar book that ever offered A, it's hot in here. B says either I will open the window or you will open the window. But why not? Because if you present it that way, suddenly your students will say, my goodness, do you know what? Yeah, it's not just a decision at the moment of speaking, is it? There's some sort of mood about it. The willpower, the power of will, your willpower, your desire, your certain desire to do an action. But you can only speak for yourself in that sense. If you start speaking for other people, you say, "Oh, he will open the window," and he'll turn and say, "I'm not your servant. What are you talking about? He will open the window. You open the window." Once we start looking at these sentences from a different perspective and start thinking, well, what is it that's really going on here? When we do that, we actually start to get to the heart of the language. And it really helps make everything so much easier to do.
I just love your example so much. Like, I imagine that book would be hilarious because we all kind of got used to all of these formal examples. I was like, I will open the window. You see, even I gave you the examples, which would be kind of in the polite sense or something, and you say live examples which are true, which are really happening. Oh my God.
Oh. Well, it helps to make the examples memorable, but it underlines the importance of context. And of course, it
Mm-hmm.
helps to keep my students awake during the lesson because they don't see
Right.
it coming. They expect a dry presentation where I underline the difference between will being this decision at the moment of speaking, which it isn't. We don't know if it's a decision at the moment of speaking because,
Mm-hmm.
frankly, nobody asked the person speaking when they made that decision, and you can't ask them about it until they're presented with that moment of decision making. Likewise, going to, I mean, we assume not because of the grammar here, but because of the meaning of going to. So in terms of grammar, going to isn't even a piece of grammar. It's not. It's always taught as grammar, but it's not grammar. It's meaning. It's lexical. And again, if you tell students it's lexical, it's about the meaning of going to, not the grammar, but the meaning of going to, then you can take it out of the realm of grammar, and it's one less grammar rule that they need to learn. Students are much better at learning the meaning of things than learning the systems of things.
Right. So, Christopher, having said all of these, what is the solution, first of all? Because teachers are confused. I'm talking about non-native teachers, right? So I guess the 90% of teachers are confused because if we don't live in the country, we go, as I said, through the same books, right? Students are scared, they are confused, they are tired of grammar, they make constant mistakes, and they ask the questions. They ask teachers the questions which we are not able to answer because as you said, context is the most important, right? So being in front of these course books, where to find this balance, how to present the exercises, should we go through them, should we prepare only on our own, exercises on our own, or what to do?
It's a really tricky situation. But before I address it, one thing that I want to point out is that there's nothing privileged about being a native speaker in this regard. Most native speaker teachers that I've met still hold by this idea of future simple. If you ask most native speaker teachers or most non-native speaker teachers how many tenses there are in English, very few will actually say, do you mean tense or do you mean verb forms?
Okay.
And even then, most of them will say, oh, I guess there's like 12 or 18, which is an exaggerated number, certainly. I think
what
that
what what I wanted to say is, meaning not native speaker, that we don't have this inner feeling, you know, which you
But that inner
possibly have.
feeling is what blinds people to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is one of the reasons that people love to travel. It's not just so that you can travel and see new places, it's so that you can appreciate where you've come from and you can see your own home in a different way. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this goes right back to, you know, the origins of philosophy around travel. Who was it that I was reading? I think it was somebody like Alain de Botton when he wrote in The Art of Travel. He was talking about how a particular Frenchman left his chateau and traveled just a couple of hours across the country and discovered that people had a different kind of chimney in the kitchen. And the people who had that chimney couldn't believe that other people would have a chimney of any other sort. It was unconscionable. But we are blinded to it. We just
Mm-hmm.
take things as they are. We say, well, that's how we say it. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't
Yeah.
even help the person saying that's how we say it.
Mm-hmm.
The questions that you ask, though, are really, really important and very difficult to answer, because course books build upon what they present. So if a course book presents a difference between will and going to, stripped of all context, and then gives you binary choices between will and going to, stripped of most context, they will say, well, this is right and this is wrong. But all you need to do is add an extra layer of context, which is in some cases just one line of dialogue before the given sentence in the workbook or wherever. And you change the context so entirely that the wrong answer becomes the right answer. And unfortunately, that's very difficult to work around. For lower level students, I really don't think that it's necessary for them to learn rules. What they need, much more than that, would be exemplary contexts. So if we assume that a low level student is never going to progress much higher than they've already reached, by giving them some useful context, the sort of context that would come up in their daily lives, we're at least equipping them with the sort of language that they can use. And if they keep going further, then you could start looking at rules.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that we have to unpack when we teach people conditionals. You know, when you, and yet conditionals are almost absurdly easy if you just know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is a moment where I really have to thank Michael Lewis for writing books like The English Verb, and Alex Tilbury for presenting what was in that sort of book as part of a course. I mean, my life as a teacher changed about 6 years ago when I did the language awareness course. This was a course offered by International House, delivered at my school. It was long and it was quite painful at times because we actually had to explain grammar to ourselves and to each other. But it revealed a huge amount that I was completely unaware of. I'd been happy to teach what the books said. Sometimes I'd say, it doesn't sound quite right to me, but I don't know any better, so let's go with it. But that all changed after doing this course. So you need sometimes to really examine your own assumptions. So for those students, I try to teach things contextually. And if that means abandoning the book for a while, so be it. And if that means keeping an eye out for those grammar structures when they appear in the mid-year or end-of-year tests, so be it. You know, I mark very flexibly. Let me put it that way. And if a student can explain to me the decisions that they make, I'll give them the credit for that, rather than for getting the right answer to a question where I don't believe that one of the answers is wrong.
Yeah, I see. I wanted to ask such question, Christopher. What would be the balance between, if I ask it correctly, kind of presenting the lexic, you know, the actual functions, even lower level students, for example, booking the hotel, so we go through kind of preparing for traveling, just for living abroad or traveling, right? What would be the balance? How much we should concentrate on grammar, or should we just say, let's go through the dialogues, let's just practice these situations and just take it as it is, and even, kind of forget about the actual grammar exercises?
Well, there's a lot that you can do with short dialogues. I mean, if you've got a piece of grammar that's in a dialogue, you can ask your students why you think that the speaker chose that form of grammar. And if they can explain it, then they're doing a better job than most of the grammar presentations anyway. And as long as their explanation works for most contexts, and you don't say that what they're saying is universally applicable, unless it is, then I think that you will at least be helping students along, and you'll be providing them with less to unlearn in later years. But the choice of what to teach students is dynamic and in many respects impossible. One of the examples that you gave is something that a student has asked me about, which was this idea of booking a hotel room. I have never in my life had to speak with another human being when I wanted to book holiday accommodation. Never.
Right.
And I've traveled to 50 countries in my life. And in all that time, I've not once had to interact with another human being. I've always done it through, like, I don't know, booking.com or Expedia, hostelworld.com. Everything has been there.
Right.
And I can't think of a time when I've needed particular set phrases to complete those interactions, because the time that you need to speak to people in hotels is usually unpredictable time. For example, a couple of years ago, I was traveling back from Moldova to Poland overland. I booked all of my accommodation online, but for some reason, when I arrived in Cluj-Napoca in Romania, it's a beautiful city. If you ever get the chance to visit it, it's really worth going to. When I was checking into my hostel, they looked at my passport and they looked at me and they went, "Ah." I said, "Well, what's the problem?" They said, "Oh, well, we thought you would be a woman." I said, "Oh, is that an issue?" And they said, "Well, it is and it isn't. The problem is we've booked you into an all-female dorm." "Ah," I said, "so what's the solution?" They said, "Well, I suppose we'll have to upgrade you to a private." Now imagine having to teach that. I mean, first of all, how do you predict these situations? I mean, you could have a lot of fun trying to predict similar situations, and I suppose your students would have a fun and interesting lesson doing that. Like, what sort of situations can you imagine would happen that are never taught in a book? That could be a lot of fun. But learning things like, "Excuse me, I would like to inquire about the availability of a bed for 4 nights, non-smoking, please, and a twin." It's like, no, you get your phone out, finished.
That's right. And I don't know why this example came to my mind, because so many books
It's a classic. Students ask for it as well.
Yeah, and students
They're
ask for
worried
it.
that they're going to have to do something that they've never had to do before. Just because now they're learning English, they think they will have to do this. If they never had English lessons, they'd never have to do it either.
Exactly. And so many books we work with actually have so many of these situations and kind of dialogues which, in fact, do not happen anymore.
Yeah. I mean, okay, you've got to teach people something. So you've got to put something into the course book. So I do understand it from that perspective. But at the same time, it sets up this unreal situation that you actually think you're going to need these expressions. And there's nothing worse. I mean, I do praise coursebook writers for trying their best, but there's nothing worse than somebody delivering a line that they've clearly learned from a coursebook. So how many times have you seen a coursebook that has like English in action or real English, something like that? And one of the expressions is, "Wow, what an interesting story." I had something like that recently in what is otherwise a pretty good book, which is Own It. I quite like Own It, partly because they have a digital edition, which really saved my skin when I was teaching online. Everything else was just paper or PDF, and it was really difficult to teach from. But Own It was pretty good. But they had these English in action sections, and they had expressions like that. And I could not get my students to say it in a way that did not come across as cold and sarcastic. Wow, what an interesting story. If you say it that way, you're going to get a slap. So it's better for them not to know that expression and to just say something spontaneous, something that they haven't had to dredge forth from their memory banks. It's a
So
kind of
true.
catch-22 in a way, isn't it? Got to teach them something, but when you teach them something, it's going to be the wrong thing because they don't need it. But there is no right thing that they will need because you can't know what that is ahead of time.
Exactly. And taking everything into account, would it be appropriate if I ask you what are the course books that you use? So what are the materials that you are going through? Maybe you could recommend at least some parts, some units.
I think because of the experiences of the last 12 to 15 months, having something that is available digitally is really a
Mm-hmm.
must.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using English in Mind for one of my classes, and it was the least successful class, and I only had a PDF version of everything. So there was no interactivity, no exercises that you could click on. But even with interactive course books, there are major issues. The first of which being that only the person sharing the screen can control anything on the course book. So what's the point of having all of these interactive activities where you've got sentence halves to drag and connect if it's only the teacher who can do that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just makes for the most teacher-centered lessons possible. You can't give your students autonomy. So there are always going to be these sort of limits. And if there was a coursebook publisher out there who could solve that by making a kind of something in between like a student book and something the students could use, like the workbook that they get, if there could be some sort of balance, maybe there already is, I don't know, but that could really help if we find ourselves having to teach online again, or if we're teaching some sort of hybrid classes in the future, or one-to-ones for that matter, because with one-to-one students, a lot of those will be online, and having a course book that you can use that the students can access would be a real boon. But yeah, I've developed something of a love-hate relationship with a lot of course books. They do provide you with a lot of language that you'd never think of yourself. And for exam preparation courses, you really do need a course book that covers lots of topics and gives you a lot of exam practice. So the Ready For series is an old standard that I still swear by. I've tried writing my own materials as well. So for anyone who visits my website, which is closelyobserved.com, I do have some materials. For example, 66 Little Lessons, which has proved very popular amongst teachers. It's a PDF, but also a PowerPoint pack. And it has lots of conversational things. So there's a bit of grammar there because it suggests, I try to suggest a piece of grammar that could be used in that context. So when people are talking about, I don't know, making decisions or something, then the language we commonly use for offering suggestions and making decisions is kind of introduced as part of that lesson. But it doesn't offer any kind of, exercises where it's like task 1, A, B, C, D, E, or anything like that. The teacher would still be responsible for those sort of things. So yeah, course books, it's difficult to really get the balance, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel for coursebook writers. There's a part of me that would love to be one in the future because it would be great to kind of see what that's all about. But it's a thankless task because you might be happy with your coursebook, in which case you tend not to say much about it. But if you find a coursebook you really don't like, you don't stop talking about it as the teacher. The halls echo with teachers complaining about the course books they've been lumbered with.
True, so true. And as we had a small discussion before this session with Christopher, we were discussing the current situation, what we are going through, this offline, online, and the whole transformation we are teachers kind of forced to go through so fast, because we always go through some transformations. We all the time develop, and experience comes, and our students teach us a lot of lessons how to improve ourselves. But right now we were kind of pushed to such extreme development. And talking about this, Christopher, can we cover this question, what a true teacher is? In your opinion, what is the most important skill right now for a teacher? And overall, this offline-online situation, your insights?
Yeah, this question, what is a true teacher? until the pandemic, I would have been unable to give an answer or give any guidance for that, because teachers are such a varied population. You can take 5 good teachers and look for common threads there, and apart from personality aspects, they're sympathetic, or they think about what their students really need, they're sociable, they have good rapport, those sort of things. I mean, that just goes with being a relatively decent human being. So I think it was always difficult to say what a true teacher was, or what the most important skill was that a teacher needed. But now that I've spent about a year and a half or so teaching online, I do know what that is now. And it's a combination of presence and focus. Because you need to be there online. And I know it sounds obvious, but if you think about the way that we teach in the physical classroom, we're not always there. We try to make space for our students, which is a good thing. You give them a task, you say, now work together, and you step back so that they don't feel that you're still waiting for responses when now is time for them to do the work. So you can remove yourself from the dynamic. I find that doesn't really work in the same way online. You need to be much more present. You need to be a bigger part of the lessons to keep the momentum of the lesson going, especially when you're teaching lower levels, and especially when you're teaching students like teenagers who arrive at your class after 7 or 8 hours of regular school. And if that regular school was online, they have had enough. So you need to be present, and you need to push things a lot more. Focus is another thing as well, because when you're in the classroom and the student is there with you, it's like being with a friend in a cafe in many respects. It's easy to devote your attention to a friend in a cafe. But when the student is represented by a little box that big, often black, it's very difficult to maintain that focus, because you lose the rapport and the warmth of the presence of another person, and it's very easy to start letting your attention wander. It's like, oh, I wonder where that person is going to out on the street just there. Wow, is that 2 number 4 buses, one after the other? That's really interesting. What were you saying? Sorry. No, that's very interesting. That's good. Yeah, keep going. I have to remember to get something for that candle. Yeah. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I do it, but I'm sure it's possible that some teachers have 2 windows open. I know that the students have more than one window open during their lessons. And I'm sure that some teachers, when the students are off in a breakout room, they've got Twitter or whatever open in another tab. And they're like, okay, I'll give them a few more minutes. I'll just check a few more tweets, and then I'll go and poke my head round the corner and see if they are at least trying to speak a bit of English. So presence and focus, I think that's the key.
Right. And how do you think we will change, students will change, teachers will change, the whole education will change, if it will? Once we are back to normal, will we be back there, and how well we will be prepared in case of anything?
Well, I suppose we can look at, we can think about parallels, can't we? We can look at other aspects of our lives. And we can think about, for example, well, I grew up watching things like Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Yeah. And then after my childhood had passed, there was a long period where there were no Indiana Jones or Star Wars films being made. And then they came back. They made some new films. So I was excited. I was overjoyed. And then I saw them. And that feeling of disappointment in the anticlimax really kind of cost me my love for those 2 franchises, I have to say. The same with Star Trek. I just don't care about these things anymore. And I do worry a little bit that, having missed face-to-face lessons so much, when we do go back to some sense of normality, there will be a kind of anticlimactic thing to it. Like, we expect to go back into the classroom and people will be popping champagne corks everywhere, and there'll be confetti, and it's like, ba-bam! You can now have a regular teacher-centered class with students in a horseshoe trying to find page 84 in their book. rather than telling people to find page 84 in the PDF whilst
Mhm.
they're in their little black boxes. So there is a danger that in getting too excited without thinking what it really means to be excited and what we can do to sustain the excitement, we might find that it's all a bit of a letdown and it all goes flat. We might find that some students prefer the online world. Some students have already told me that. A lot of my adults have told me that they don't want to go back to the face to face classroom because they don't live in the center of town where the school is. And the 90-minute lessons that we offer actually cost them 2.5 hours because of travel time. And that 2.5 hours has to be accounted for with a babysitter. And if the lesson
Mhm.
starts at 7 o'clock and they don't get home till 9, the babysitter charges even more. The children are querulous when you get home because they wanted a kiss goodnight and they're waiting for you. It can really throw your daily routine out. If
Mhm.
instead you've just got a little laptop or a tablet, boom, you're there in the lesson as the lesson starts. So I think that we will have to get used to teaching online in the long term and not just for emergency reasons. So we can't then say, I'm doing the best I can given the limitations. That's fine for the first couple of months. But after that time, you've got to start thinking, okay, well, those limitations have to be dealt with. I can't just hide behind them as an excuse anymore. So if my internet connection keeps causing me problems, maybe now I actually have to look into it. And that actually ties in quite neatly with the grammar points I was making earlier about looking in the right place in the sentence. Because a lot of people think they've got a great internet connection because they can watch Netflix in 4K. Turns out their internet connection is awful for upload because they never thought about that before. They're like,
Mhm.
why does my Zoom connection suck? You go, well, that's because you're uploading video of yourself in real time. What do you expect? Do a speed test, not download, upload speed. And then they suddenly go, oh my goodness, it's no wonder. And even now, when you go to some internet service providers' web pages, they tell you what great download speeds you can expect. They don't make it clear that that's purely download. It's not the upstream at all. So for a lot of people, students and teachers, we're kind of having to look at all of those limits that we faced before. And now we actually need to solve the problems that they present. We can't just say, it is what it is.
Mhm. So true, exactly. And I was also, as you were explaining right now about this normality, getting back to normality, I think somehow unconsciously I also had this thought in my mind what it would be. Maybe we are so looking forward to it that it would be a happy moment, but in fact, maybe a lot of people are okay, especially adults, exactly the situation which you described, because right now I have a student who wants to have face-to-face classes and we are in the same city, so it's fine, I can offer that, but he has to travel 1 hour one way, which
Wow.
gives him 2 hours travel for 1 hour class.
Hmm.
Not to mention that at some point he gets stuck in a traffic jam and he is late and I cannot prolong the class because I have another one coming.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
kind of gets a bit disappointed for the obvious reason, but that he cannot, imagine the online class. However, we had one for some reasons, and he said, "No, I really, he's very traditional, in this sense, and I want to have face to face, but
Hmm.
the disadvantage is obvious. So it's really a question what it will be after we come back." So
Yeah.
true,
And the
Christopher.
converse might also be possible as well, where students have gotten used to the teachers being very flexible because of online limitations,
Yeah.
and they say, "Oh,
Hmm.
my internet connection is not great. Can we just move the lesson till tomorrow? I mean, it didn't cost you anything in travel time." And a lot of the time, teachers will be like, "Yeah, of course." When they go back to face and they say, "I can't make it today. Can we just move it to tomorrow?" You'd be like, "Well, I don't know. I'm already here. I'm sorry, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to pay for that lesson."
Yes.
So yeah, they'll transfer their expectations back across, and that could be another issue to deal with.
Sure, that's sure. Okay, we'll see what it is. Christopher, I wanted to ask you, what are your sources of inspiration, motivation, energy in these times and in general?
Well, I've really appreciated having much more contact with my family. That has helped enormously. When I was working in the kind of the academic year leading up to the pandemic, my day often looked like this. I'd get up at 6 o'clock to get my daughters ready so that I could take first the younger one to preschool and then the older one onto her school. So they'd be deposited wherever they needed to be by between 7 and 8 o'clock. And after that, I would then go to school for a morning class. If I was lucky, I'd have a break between the morning class and the afternoon sessions, and then I'd work through usually till 8:30. And depending on the bus, I'd find myself getting home around 9ish. And that meant that I'd been out of the home for 12, maybe 13 hours, and for most of that time away from my family. So apart from the school run, I didn't really get to see my children. And all that changed when we went online because they lost their schooling as well. For the first lockdown, they only had homework sent in the post, that sort of thing. But it meant that every 15-minute gap between lessons became a moment just to go and see my girls and see my wife. And that made me a lot happier. That gave me a lot of the sort of support that I really needed. Aside from that, in terms of kind of teacher development, I try to look for development wherever it can be had, even if it's not at all related to teaching. So I would like to recommend, if anyone ever has the opportunity to watch a TV show called Ted Lasso, they really ought to. Have you heard of this one, Olga?
No, I haven't.
So Ted Lasso is, it's hard to describe just how good this show is. The gist of it is that a Premier League football team in England has lost its main owner, and the new owner is basically the ex-wife of the old owner. And they've gone through this horrible divorce. The ex-wife is now very angry at her former husband and wants to ruin the football club to kind of really stick it at him. And to do that, she sacks the manager and brings in an American football coach called Ted Lasso over from the States. It's played by Jason Sudeikis, who you might know from a whole load of other movies and TV shows. So he comes over. He's never even seen a football match before. He doesn't know the rules. He's a real fish out of water. But what he is very good at is man management and motivation. And he treats other people fairly. He learns their names. He learns their likes. He learns what motivates them. And he uses all of that to make them the best version of themselves possible. And he even says that's his philosophy. And you've got this kind of protagonist-antagonist situation, which could go in a very obvious way with most TV shows that you watch. The protagonist will eventually have to defeat the antagonist. But in Ted Lasso, that antagonist is only an antagonist until Ted Lasso fixes them. And I watched that show thinking, this is kind of what I want to achieve as a teacher. I've got all of these students who go through life. They have different problems. They can't focus. They can't build their relationships well with other people. I might not be able to make them perfect or really help them achieve a lot of success in English, but I can make them or help them make themselves better than they were when they met me. And I think that's really kind of becoming the guiding principle as much as possible, because a lot of the time, you get students who want to get better at English, and actually it's not that likely that they will. Maybe they're already at a high level, and to go any higher would require them to make real sacrifices. And that might be too much for a lot of them. But you can help them become better at critical thinking. You can help them to re-examine their prejudices, to start seeing things from a different perspective. And it might not have a big impact on their language skills, but it might have an impact on who they are as people.
That's so true. Oh my God, this is absolutely wise and noble thought. Thank you so much, Christopher, for sharing it.
Well, it's not my wise and noble thought, it's the TV show.
No, I mean, no, your comment, what you said, because, students comment first of all what we tend to think of, how to present this grammar, how to teach them book in a hotel, a room in a hotel or so. But the first thing we need to think of, and actually, I think I came to this with experience, definitely not with my first lessons and not in university. I cannot remember that we would be told this, that first of all, just to stay human, be human, and kind of be the kind of interactive human relationship
Hmm.
involving teaching a language and learning a language and studying a language and so on. That's right. And kind of do not harm and do not make them hate the subject they are
Yeah.
learning, they're studying, and you are teaching. That's so true. That's what I meant. Christopher, thank you so much for this session. I guess we would wrap up this one and have another one maybe in some nearest future. What would you
That'd be
say?
lovely. Yeah, it'd be
I
great.
would
Yeah.
I would be happy. Everyone who stayed with us till this moment, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for your comments. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for the topics you would like us to cover next time, please leave a comment below. Just DM us on our Instagrams and always stay connected. Don't forget to subscribe, to like this video, because it will make a tremendous difference and more people will be able to find it, to watch it and benefit from it the same way we did, you did. And Christopher, thank you so much for all of the ideas, all of the thoughts, all of the insights. I definitely learned a lot today, and I can thank you enough for all of the knowledge you provided. Thank you so much. I actually linked in the description below Christopher website, so you can find
Thank you.
and check it out. Christopher also has YouTube channel Closely Observed, where he provides lots of valuable and helpful videos, a lot of them about the writing and preparing for exams, but not only. So also please feel invited to check those out. And all right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Christopher. Wish you a wonderful evening
Thank
and
you.
see you again
I hope
later.
so. Yes. Thank
Thank
you very much, Olga.
you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.